Joining us now is Senior Coalitions Advisor for Concerned Veterans for America, retired Master Sergeant Jason Beardsley. He's a decorated combat veteran and an intelligence officer. Jason, I just want to start out with this question that I have, and I know a lot of other people have. It's a very simple one. How could something like this happen?
Well, I think General Ryder, the Air Force general there, gave a pretty good rundown. We trust our service members with a lot of information. That is a necessity in the military. And so we're also living in a new era where technology makes these things very dangerous. With a few keystrokes, a young man in Massachusetts can actually enter the geopolitical stratosphere, even though he's not meaning to do this. But let's be clear, leaks have happened throughout the history of this country, going all the way back to the beginning. There is a different characteristic, though, you see here, where they usually come from folks that are trying to make money, selling information to foreign powers. That's not the case here. That would be a typical case of spying. So that happens with some frequency. But in this case, we have to look at a new generation of folks that are young and they are involved in a lot of technology. And again, with a few keystrokes, they can enter the world fray, even though they're unwitting of that. So this is a very complex situation.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that stood out for me was the lack of motivation, essentially. Everyone who was described in these articles about this young man say it wasn't that he was opposed to the war in Ukraine or anything like that. He doesn't appear to be part of some larger espionage unit or mission. Doesn't appear to be under the thumb of a foreign power. Now, maybe something will arise that suggests otherwise. But they was just trying to show off, more or less. And I'm wondering, if that's the motivation, what kind of concerns, security concerns, are prompted by that? And what can the Department of Defense do to enhance the safeguards in place?
This is going to be part of that double-edged sword. Again, it's very complex because at the end of the day, you cannot completely keep all secrets. What's the old saying? If you want to keep a secret between two people, just make sure that one of them is dead. So that's been a challenge for the government, going all the way back to George Washington, who's had some of his papers blown in the correspondence world. So what we really ought to do is zoom back a little bit. Americans who fought for this country, veterans I represent through Concerned Veterans for America, we believe in the values of the nation. And so it becomes a little complex. Do we stand on the side of transparency and accountability or on the side of protecting national secrets? And so we have to kind of split the difference. That's where we look to the media, a place like what you're doing, to expose really objectively, without sensationalism, what are the real stories here? What are the implications of the context? And it really does beg the question to the American policymakers that our decisions in foreign policy should really look for cooperation, accountability, things that when they're seen in the broad daylight are actually going to meet with the approval of the American population. So if you start to see answers inside these stories about what our government is doing and how they're making decisions, that becomes the important part for the media to objectively treat, not focusing so much on the individual.
Right. I mean, I'm in the industry where I appreciate these leaks. I want to know information. It's very interesting to me. It's obviously of great news value to understand all this stuff. And so I welcome the leaks. But I also am not an idiot. I'm cognizant that the government doesn't, and that there are real-world impacts to U.S. relations overseas. And I'm curious, what is your assessment of how this leak would impact our relations with allies, specifically South Korea, Israel, which were mentioned in the documents?
Sure. Well, this is to the director of the CIA who said this is very deeply unfortunate. And what that means, the implications with our allies and with other nations, this can go on for a long time. The story is only just beginning. So the life of that, again, is what are the implications of U.S. decision-making? And there are some things that ought to be kept secret. I think you heard John Kirby talk about it at the podium. There's a lot of this stuff that was never meant for public consumption, and yet we have to balance successfully what's the difference between accountability, transparency, and then, of course, maintaining national security. So this is not an easy one, but I think responsibly, as you're talking about, understanding the leaks, as long as you're not putting information out that's damaging to operations that are ongoing, or in the case of personnel that might be human intelligence assets, I think it's appropriate to treat the substance, the implications per story, and there's a lot lot of different stories here. So this ought to be the focus of the media. For Americans, I think they should be looking for that objective reporting.
Sure. Well, thank you very much for unpacking this. Retired Master Sergeant Jason Beardsley, really appreciate the insights this morning.